thought, fun, scale, relationship, did and
is Michael Gilmour. I'm his co-host. And welcome to the show. This is an interesting topic because we're really going to get deep into how to mitigate the loss in a disaster and how to maximize the benefit in a disaster. And there have been a lot of times in my life where I've gone through a disaster and it's actually turned out better on the other side. And there's been a lot of times I've gone through disaster and it's been obviously horrible. We can't change disaster. We cannot change what happens to us when disaster strikes. But what we can do, change, or what we can manage is how we respond to that disaster. And today, that is the topic we're going to hit. And I have done it both ways. I've gone into a disaster and went home and curled up into a ball and let it roll out and have more chaos follow and failure. Or I've done it the other way too, where I embrace it, understand it, fight it, and win back. And we're going to go deep into this. Michael Gilmour is our guest. He comes in from Australia and he came up with this topic. And I love this topic, Michael, I have to say. But I'm curious why you came up with this topic. What was your thinking behind it? There he is.
Hi there, I'm here. I'm here. It's so good to be here for the Completed Entrepreneur. It's my favorite time of the week where I get to interact, Colin, with other entrepreneurs, those in the room, and those when it's syndicated on podcasts and everything. And it's one of those special moments in my week where giving back to the entrepreneurial community. And when I looked at this topic, Colin, I said, what to do when disaster strikes? It happens to every entrepreneur. And it's something that's quite often just not talked about. And I thought, gee, it'd be really good to unpack this one. And I know in my business career, I've had so many disasters. Like, it's been so many disasters, so many highs, so many lows and such. And I know there's be some people in this room right now thinking, yeah, I'm going through one of those moments, one of those disasters. Yeah, you've lost a partner, a key partner. You've lost a key client. You aren't able to raise some cash or something like that, and you were really banking on raising that cash. There's a whole lot of things on the business side that can really impact you with a disaster. But there's also on the personal side as well. What do you do when your child gets really sick? That's a disaster. What do you do when you have friction between your partner and yourself? What do you do in these personal circumstances or your personal finances really struggle? Or there's myriad of different things can happen. And every story is a little bit different, Colin. And I was thinking, to be quite blunt, I was thinking, this is a topic that no one talks about. They always talk about, man, I triumphed over adversity. I did this, I did that. It was just awesome. And look, I then saw a unicorn floating through the sky and a pig flew as well. And all this sort of stuff. Everyone talks about those times, the great times. But how about the really tough times? Those tough times when you're waking up every hour and you just can't get any sleep. Those times when you feel all alone. You're in your business and you don't have anyone you can turn to. Those times when no one around you seems to understand what's going on. There's times when you go to a friend's birthday party and you think it's so frivolous compared to what you're dealing with. These sort of things are important for an entrepreneur to wrestle with, to understand, to come to grips with. These are really important. And how do you deal with them in a decision-making sense? And how do you deal with them in an emotional sense? Because out of all the things an entrepreneur faces, the disasters will take the biggest emotional toll. So how do you deal with that? And so, Colin, I thought to myself, this is a topic we need to really unpack. So if you're in the audience there and you're saying, oh, wow, this sounds really interesting. I've got something to contribute to this, or I have some questions, or whatever it is. Put your hand up. We'd love to have you up on stage. We can see we've already got JL up here. Maybe we can flip to JL there. And JL, fire away with your questions on this topic. Then I'll come back to Colin.
Hello, good afternoon, folks, or good evening to some of you.
It's good morning for me.
Oh, good morning. There you go. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. I just wanted to say I'm so glad that you covered this topic. This topic is a kind of a, how do I say? It is the calm before the storm for some of us. Some of these topics, when disaster hits, it's the beginning of the end and you just don't know it. I guess it just depends on how you react to it, right? But people, like you said, they don't talk about it. They don't talk about it at all. I had a startup and one of these things kind of happened to me and it kind of led to the beginning of the end of my business. So not the end of my business, but the end of me being with my business. So I am just here to listen and learn and contribute when you called it on.
I think that's going to be a fascinating story. But before we lean on you, JL, Michael, let's get down and dirty. You brought this topic up, and this is all about stories and learning from actual events. I've got two right now in my mind right now that I'd like to talk about. Two disasters. There's probably about, if it give me about 5 minutes, I'll probably have 10. But I got two right now, but I'd like for you to go first. You got to share with us a time when you went through a disaster and almost felt like this is it or whatever, and how you dealt with it. And how you dealt with it, like I opened the show up by saying, maybe that you didn't deal with it, and that's okay. Everybody deals with disaster differently, right? Or maybe you did deal with it in a particular way and you turned it around and made it a better outcome, or at least you had a better mindset from the outcome that you had given the disaster. So why don't you start with sharing your disaster, one of them, and I know you've had many.
Yeah, one of them. I had one happen this week, but
Wow. Okay.
which I'll share. But I'll go back to I'm working my way through it. But back in 2001, and I ended up raising numbers of millions of dollars in venture capital, and I remember finally getting the signed documents, all that sort of stuff, and I don't know, half a dozen or so small investors, but one major investor. And I'll never forget, I was in this dingy old office at the time, and it was an online business. It was an amazing idea, amazing concept that it was getting invested into, by the way. And I remember getting the signed papers and I leapt to the roof. I'm sure my head hit the roof. I was so excited. And particularly when you see that first, it came in tranches and from the major investor. And I remember seeing my bank balance the first time, the first check hit. And I was so excited. Now the fast forward, was it 18 months or something like that? And just so happens that investor was Compaq Computers. And at that time, I woke up one day and the business model was basically burn down your cash. And I employed 25 people or something like that. So
Right. The business model was what? Burn down what?
Burn down the cash. And then you get your next tranche as you
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
And you met your milestones, all that sort of stuff. So we smashed the milestone. And so I put my hand out for the next tranche of money. And so the guys from Compaq said, look, it's not coming. And I said, sorry? Yeah, it's not coming. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, you're obligated. And they said, yeah, we know. But we're merging with Hewlett Packard. And you're just one of many small little investments that's getting in the way of this global merger of these two huge companies. And basically, we've allocated $300 million in legal fees to clean these things up. And lawyer number 455 will speak to you in 6 months' time. I'm obviously paraphrasing a lot. Yeah, and I thought, holy crap. We ran their cash down. We did exactly what we said we'd do. And we've done everything right. And I was like, I'll never forget that phone call. And the guy from Compact Australia said, look, I'm really sorry. I know this is not something you want to hear. I said, something I want to hear? You got to be kidding me. It's just like, I'm looking around at all these people in my office and everything like that who've all been working their rear end off to deliver this product and everything. And it was the ultimate disaster. The ultimate disaster. I had no wriggle room. I had to instantly raise capital. And if I didn't do that, we're dead. And if you've ever raised capital, had to do it instantaneously, you'll understand that basically it's impossible.
It's expensive or impossible. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's expensive or impossible. And yeah, so what did I end up doing? Yeah, it's funny. I'm emotionally getting back and remembering. It's funny. Emotions are a very strong memory. And one of the first things I did was I spoke to the staff. I said, this is what's happened. I'm really sorry. I put all the cards on the table. And the second thing I did was I spoke to the small investors. And I said, this is what's happened. The third thing I did was I went and personally visited every account payable. Or if I couldn't visit them, I called them up. And I said, this is what's happened. And we're working our way through it. We need some time to work our way through it, but I will keep you up to date. They're basically all the obligations you have to do. And let me tell you, it's one of the most humiliating things you feel like you're doing as an entrepreneur. But to this day, I because I did that, I'm held in high esteem by many of those people. Because I was right up front and said, this is what we're doing. And yeah, and I did. I kept them informed. And the biggest issue for me was making sure we weren't trading while insolvent at any time. So as soon as you trade, if you trade while insolvent, by the way, which is you're incurring debt when you know you cannot pay, then that's a jailable offense. It's one thing that if you have the support of your small investors and they can tip some money in and everything like that to try to keep it going and all that sort of thing. So as soon as that, the number one issue for me was, as soon as that was pulled, then I had to close the company. Because whatever you do as an entrepreneur, you can always live to fight again, but it's very hard to live to fight again from jail. You've got to do the right thing by everyone, and you have to be very clear on the law around these sort of times. Yeah, so that's what I ended up doing. And emotionally, I remember my wife, she's the most wonderful person in the world. She really is. She went and got a church minister to come around and try to spend some time with me. And it gets to the point where you just don't want to talk any BS anymore. You really do. And I said to the guy, he goes, oh, I really care what you're going through. No one can understand what you're going through. They have no idea. And I said to him, I'll decide, I'll work out whether you actually care or not when you give me a call in 2 weeks' time. You become really just cut to the chase. And I was very abrasive with the guy because you just don't have time. I remember going up in the elevator, Colin, and I put my head down. I end up working. I was up at about 4:30 each day. I began in the office around 6, and I put my head down in the elevator, and I'd say this, it was like a mantra. It was, into the breach I now come. The breach of a gun. And you get shot out of the gun. And I put my head up, and I step out of the elevator, and it was like, you're instantly into chaos. Instantaneously. And it was emotionally, the toll that took on me was really hard. But it was hardest when I was working till late at night. And one time my wife said to me, she said, I need to tell you something. And I said, okay. Today, Tim, our son, he used to always, his job was to set the table for dinner. And he'd say, is Dad coming home for dinner? And my wife would say, no, he's not able to come to dinner. But then she said something to me, it actually broke me, Colin. She said, today he stopped asking. Today he stopped asking. Yeah, and it was, Yeah, that I was working, trying to rescue this whole situation, rescue everyone else in it, and look after stuff, look after. I was trying to do everything to keep things going. In the end, we had to really look at the cold light of day and sort of crunch the numbers and everything. He said, okay, we just got to close this thing down. So we put it into administration, and it came out of administration. In fact, all the creditors
Administration, we don't, the rest of the world doesn't understand what that means.
Oh, administration. It's not bankruptcy.
Sort of
What
like
you're
a
doing
bankruptcy protection.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. It's
Chapter
bankruptcy
11.
protection.
It's Chapter
Yeah, it's a
11 in the
bit.
States versus Chapter 7. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what it is, you're doing a deal with your creditors.
Yeah, it's Chapter 11. Yeah.
And yeah, okay, Chapter 11. Okay, that's what it is. We end up doing a deal with the creditors. Every one of the creditors said these guys have done nothing wrong, and look, it's just one of those things that happen in business and all that sort of stuff. And they actually voted to take 10 cents on the dollar. I can't even remember what it was now, and for the business to continue, and to get recapitalized and continue. And so they voted for that. But I think, Colin, the thing that really struck me was I've never felt so lonely in my life. I've never felt so lonely. It was.
Were you worried
It was
about the
just.
way other people thought about you at that point? I'm just curious. Like
No,
your family,
no,
your
I didn't have
friends.
time.
No.
I did not have the mind space for that. The thing I had to do, and I actually went through a ritual every morning. I looked in the mirror. You have your shower, get your clothes on, all that sort of stuff. You look in the mirror and you say, do I like what I see? In other words, am I operating with integrity? That was the key thing for me. The absolute key thing for me was I'm operating with integrity. And am I doing my best? Other people will not understand, but was I doing my best? For instance, one of my exec guys, one of the things you'll discover by your team during these times is the immense pressure that comes on your team as well. Put it this way, we have to get rid of the majority of the staff, but you get some individuals in the team, in the management team, who really do not understand what you're going through and how little control you actually have other than trying to operate with integrity. And I heard one of the guys, one of my key guys, was down the local pub and just absolutely blasting me to numbers of the staff, the other senior staff, and everything. That I was an idiot. You have no idea what I'm doing, everything. And of course, it came back to me. And that was really hard to take. It was really hard to take. But the thing to understand is, in those times, some of even your closest confidants need to blow off steam. If they don't, they'll implode. And I had to find it within myself to be gracious towards him. And fast forward quite a number of years later, and I reached out to him, and he'd been running his own business and all that sort of stuff at this stage. And we got together, and he apologized profusely for his conduct. He said, I never realized, because he'd been through not something like this, but he'd seen how little decision-making power sometimes you have. And we've become great friends since. Great friends.
Awesome.
And it's a really tough time. You must operate with integrity. If you do not operate with integrity, then what happens is that no one will ever follow you as a leader again.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to operate with integrity. And even if they do not understand what you're going through, which they won't, by the way, they'll have no concept of what you're going through. And just understand I had to pick a term, that's the cross you chose to pick up. Yeah, when you became an entrepreneur, sometimes you just got to go along and bear that. And that's really tough. It's really tough. And the small investors, they lost everything. They lost absolutely everything. I went back to them as a number of years later, and I had another sort of business opportunity. And they invested in it.
Wow.
And I remember when they said, here's some money to put into it and all that sort of stuff, I started crying. I couldn't help myself. Because this is where the question is, Colin, you asked before, was how do you know? What are you worried what people think? And I go, no, I was too concerned about other things. But in that moment, I suddenly realized they saw me in a way that I didn't know they saw me. They saw me in a positive light. And they said, no, look, you did everything right. But we're happy to put some money with you. And I tell you what, I made sure they made out an absolute killing on the new venture, and they did. They made a killing. And I did everything I could so that was the case. And so I made up on things. It was an incredible journey. Yeah. The other thing I ended up making decisions about is when you have your business go down. Yeah. One of the things, and you've got other investors involved and all that sort of stuff, is the first thing an entrepreneur normally does is doesn't take a salary. Let me tell you, that is the stupidest thing you could possibly ever do. Because everyone else around you is assuming you are taking a salary, including the small investors. They're assuming you're taking a salary. Take your money that's been agreed to off the table. So if you got some cash still in the business and everything like that, then take the money. And the reason why is because you can always put it back in, but you can't put it back in if you don't have it. So take the money off the table. That's number one. This is one of the lessons I learned. And yeah, you think it's like brownie points, like you're a hero because you're not taking your salary. Everyone else is looking at you and saying, you're an idiot. And I learned that. That was a hard lesson to learn. So I didn't take a whole lot of salary for quite some time. And when this first happened, Colin, and what it did was it put my family through hell. It really did. And so on the home front and everything like that, yeah, we finally, in the end, I couldn't continue on with the business. We closed it down and all that sort of stuff. There was too much emotional trauma as such. But yeah, so I've got this, we had nothing. We really had nothing. And I was juggling banks on the house and all that sort of stuff. And there's all sorts of problems, like going to the bank and saying, look, you can either foreclose or you can take my 50 grand with a credit card, I can't remember what it was, and you just put it on the mortgage. And so at least I can manage it from a 19% interest rate down to a 5% interest rate. You're having those sort of conversations. And every time I went out somewhere for a meeting or whatever, dare I say, I ended up launching another business straight away into that. I had no choice. I had to do something. And every time I went out, I'd come back thinking I would have a for sale sign put on the house by the bank. It was tough. It was really tough. I went from being worth, would have been probably 20, 30 million bucks to overnight to being minus $500,000 overnight, one day to the next. Yeah. And during those periods of time, Colin, the thing you learn really quickly is who your friends are. That's the thing you learn as an entrepreneur. Fast forward a number of years, I had a friend of mine, he had a public listed company and everything like that, and went through something very similar. Another firm actually defrauded him. I think they ended up going to jail, but it basically bankrupted his company. And I went to his office on a Saturday, and I sat across the desk from him, and I said, "You've discovered a few things, haven't you?" Yeah. He goes, "Yep." I said, "You've worked out who your friends are, don't you? Haven't you?" And he goes, "Yep." I said, "I'm here." And he started crying. Yeah. And it's tough. And even right now, you can probably hear it in my voice. I'm reliving some of the emotion of those times. It will scar you for life. And you'll learn so many lessons and you'll learn so many things as an entrepreneur. And you know what? There's a good reason why a lot of VCs are actually happy to go along and invest with entrepreneurs that have been through something like that, because the entrepreneur learns so much in that process. They learn so much. And as long as they can keep their integrity. But That's the
Wow.
story.
That's
With
a great story,
disaster.
Michael. That's a great
Yeah.
story. And I see it, I hear it in your voice, not see it. I
Yeah.
hear it in your voice, how emotionally it impacted you, and retelling that, what's challenging. I know there
It's
are
very
people in the
challenging.
audience too who would like to come up and talk about their story. And if they
Yeah.
would like to, please just raise your hand and come join us. You might not know this, but this is actually the content used for a national article that is published on startup.club. Startup.club gets top billing on Google and whatnot. It's quite a popular website. And I posted the URL right there at the top. You can also sign up to that email list that we have there as well. But Michael, if you want, I can jump into, I've got about 4 or 5 disasters in my mind. They go from business to personal. And I've got one that I've been thinking about, talking about, that happened in 1996, if you want to hear it.
Yeah, far away, Colin. This is almost therapy for us both, I think, because any
Yeah.
entrepreneur being through look, there's horrible times you go through. And sometimes sharing them, it just, yeah, you relive some of the emotion and the memory, but it actually helps. I had a bit of a disaster this week, which I'll share towards the end of this, which is interesting. But over to you, Colin. 1996. What happened?
Yeah, and I have a very similar story to what happened to you in 2000, around the dot-com crash. And anyone who follows my story, I lost $100 million when I was 29 years old. But we could talk about that, maybe not. Let me go back to 1996. We were 3 business partners who started a company. It was called Internet Direct out of Canada. It became the largest ISP in Canada. But in 1996, we were, I think we're fighting for, we're number 2, I believe, internet service provider in the Toronto area. We serviced about 100,000 customers, which was quite a lot at the time for an internet service provider. The telecoms hadn't started yet, or they were just jumping in on it. And we had set up an office with about 500 phone lines that would manage the ISP. ISP is internet service provider. And the utility company, I think it was not the phone company, I think it was another company, was digging through, doing some digging up through the ground or whatever it was, and managed to cut all 500 phone lines.
Oh,
Now,
jeez. I had that. I had that happen.
you don't know how it worked back then. Anyone who knows telecom back then, each phone line was a separate wire. Okay. So think about that for a second. Each phone line, all 500 phone lines, were a separate wire that connects. And at the time, again, we were the largest or second largest ISP in Toronto. I'll put you on mute there, Michael, or if you can put yourself on mute because we're getting a little bit of background noise. So we were the second largest provider, and we were out of business instantly. We spent 4 years building this company. 100,000 people, or maybe 200,000, it was a lot of people, customers, were cut off from the internet. And we're pretty much out of business. If you're down like that, it's unrecoverable. And in many scenarios like that, it would take weeks to recover. Okay. Now, I called everyone into the boardroom, and I remember this very specifically. I remember exactly what happened. It was about 10 a.m. And I called everyone into the boardroom, all the executives, and I said, team, and I said calmly, here's what we're going to do. We're in trouble. You all know it. We're out of business, pretty much. Not due to our fault, due to a mistake a utility company made. We're going to put out a press release and tell everyone what happened. Instead of hiding behind it, we're going to face it. We're going to face it directly. And we put out a press release, and it went out to the media in Toronto. And within an hour, every news station was reporting hundreds of thousands of people have been cut off the internet from Internet Direct. And I remember that because it was constantly played all day long on the radio. That Internet Direct, hundreds of thousands of people have been cut off. We became a household brand that day. You see where this is coming?
Yeah.
We became a household name that day. They moved like fire, the phone company. They brought in people and it took 24 hours straight work. They worked overnight, 24 hours in a row to splice each phone line and get the system back online, because this was headline news. Okay. Our demise was headline news, but it wasn't about our demise. It was about all these customers who got cut off the internet.
Wow.
And here's an example of a disaster turned into a positive outcome, because we got resolved. The customers forgave us for being down for 24 hours or probably 48 hours or 36 hours or whatever it was. But we were successful in facing it directly and coming out with a press release and making it news. And that was really probably the best example I have of turning a disaster into a positive. We had something similar about 2 years later. I don't know if you remember this. It was a scandal called Mafia Boy. He took down Yahoo. He took down a lot of websites. Yeah. And so we almost repeated the strategy. And that this time we were really large. This time we're public. We were the largest in Canada service provider of internet. And Mafia Boy was in Quebec, and he used our systems, and the media tracked it down to our ISP. And we had about 20 or so stations all parked in front of our building. So we announced a press conference, and I ran the press conference, the Mafia Boy press conference. And literally it was funny because it hit CNN, it hit front page news all across the country. Again, here was a scandal of an individual who was using our platform. And at the time, we had all these consultants helping me out with PR and advising me and everything. And they're saying, like, just say this, just say that. But when I got in front of the cameras, I turned to the cameras and I said, he was a guy who took down Yahoo and a number of websites.
Yeah, he invented the DDoS. He invented the DDoS.
Probably the DDoS, yeah.
It wasn't the DOS, he invented the DDoS.
Yeah, we had a lot of those in our time. But I said this guy was a terrorist, a cyber terrorist, and he should be dealt with accordingly. And they literally had Bill Clinton on because he had some cyber terrorism thing on CNN, and they had my clip on CNN running all day long. But again, here was another opportunity to take what appeared for a lot of companies to be a very scary moment, that somehow you were harboring a criminal on your network, and to turn it around to say, no, we actually exposed the criminal. We exposed the criminal. And here is what we did. And it turned into a very positive media event. And again, now we became a household name throughout Canada, and even getting some exposure in the US on that one. So there were two sort of PR events, negative big events, that we were able to turn into a very positive outcome.
Yeah, that's great stories. I remember, because it's funny, our lives were in parallel all the time. Here I was in Australia. I ran an ISP as well in Australia. We actually had the major telecommunication provider, when they launched their ISP, they went to all the smaller ones like us, and they deliberately cut the phone lines. They actually sent people to cut the phone lines to be able to steal the customers there. And I ended up prosecuting them, Colin, and won the case and all that sort of stuff. It was a huge issue. It was a really big issue. And they had to pay.
That's probably the best example of torturous interference, which is a legal term that we have in the United States and Canada. Torturous interference. You cannot interfere with other people's contracts of customers. It's against the law.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah. So but they actually had a strategy for doing it. It all came out and all that sort of stuff. And so they ended up paying millions and millions in the end. Yeah, but it was a fun and game. Wow, what a story. What a story. So what happened to me this week? By the way, if you're in the audience, stick your hand up. We're telling some stories. And so Colin and I are having some great therapy here. For those of you who want to join us, then feel free to come on up. So Tuesday night, Australian time here in Melbourne, Australia, I'm watching the TV, and the treasurer of Australia gets up and he declares the budget. And in declaring the budget, he has all sorts of different policies. So the first policy he decides to do is it's put a capital gains tax of 30%. So I'm
Like
thinking, okay,
interesting because this is like an external shock. Like a lot
this
of
is
times we
external
have
stuff.
disasters comes from external
Yeah.
events, not internal events.
Correct.
That's interesting.
Correct. This is an external one. So he goes 30%. Then he goes along and completely nukes family trust, all that sort of stuff. So I'm thinking, okay, so I've now doubled my tax, probably at least. And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on here? And it was just one bombshell after another. Basically, it was, he said, we're trying to make it much more equal and all that sort of stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, so you got two people. One is a sort of a worker earning $100,000 a year, and there's an entrepreneur earning $100,000 a year. I said, they're not equal because the entrepreneur's taking all the risk. So the one thing the entrepreneur could do, in my case, was diversify income through family trust, and it helps them out from a tax perspective. And it helps defray some of the risk. So they got rid of that. And I'm looking at this and going, holy crap, seriously? Seriously? Yeah, and I'm looking at Singapore that has a 0% capital gains tax rate. The US has been 0 to 20, depending on how long you hold the asset for and all that sort of stuff. And look at all these different things, Colin. And I'm thinking, wow, like, how do you deal with these external things? And so the Reserve Bank of Australia basically is going to be hiking interest rates as a result of this ridiculous budget. So they're going to be hiking interest rates. So it's harder and harder to get funds. If I wanted to get funds through say, borrowing or anything like that. So there's all these things happening external. And I know, Colin, you've been through different things with hiking of interest rates and stuff, which has been horrendous.
It's been killing small businesses. America is built on small businesses, and we're paying 10%, 20% interest rates to fund our small businesses when big companies are getting billions of dollars in China and everywhere to fund their businesses, and we're seeing growth. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's no growth in the small business economy. It's in the big business economy because interest rates are killing us.
That's absolutely correct. And because it basically it dries up capital. And it makes it really hard for the small business owner. And so I'm looking at all these different external shocks that are happening. So how did I react? One is both my wife and I, we got really angry, not at each other, but at the TV. So that felt good for about 10 minutes. And then we realized, okay, what are we going to do? So the very next day, we went out to lunch together. And we mapped out a plan. We say, these are the things we're going to do. And the number one thing in those sort of circumstances, when you get external shocks like that, the first thing you got to do is collect all the information and come and get the facts. Go and get the actual facts. And so that's what I began to do. For the last few days, I've been just getting the facts, lining all the ducks up. What is the actual impact? And so one of the options we're exploring for Colin, and I know I've talked to you about this, is what happens if we just move the companies to the US or Singapore or somewhere, and then we just leave Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we become a non-resident.
So you're trying to solve the problem already, right? You're trying to mentally get through
yeah.
that.
So I've already had meetings with organizations that specialize in doing this, and I've got another one on Monday. And just basically getting all the facts, okay? And then all I'll do is just put it in a spreadsheet and say, what happens if we stay? What happens if we go? What's the cost? What's the benefits? All that sort of stuff. And you make a decision off the facts, not the emotion. Because trust me, I was raging at the television. Then I sat down last night and I saw the opposition leader. And he gets up and he said, it's his reply to the budget. And he says, all these things the other guy said, if we get into government, we're going to repeal all of them. I'm like, hooray, if you get into government, if you are elected, and that sort of stuff. And they're typically the more fiscally responsible party and everything. Yeah, I was cheering for them. And he basically said, we've got to go on back small business and all that sort of stuff. And these are the things that we're going to do. We have one of the acts we have in Australia is the Construction Act, and has 2,000 pages of legislation that builders need to know to be able to build, quotation marks, safely and all that sort of stuff. And he said, we're going to slash it down to 200. And he just went through one act after another, how this is going to slash regulation and make it simplify everything, particularly for small business. And I was almost on my feet, Colin, cheering. Then I realized, but he's not in government yet. What do I do? But yeah, so there's external factors which will impact your business. And particularly if you're at the stage of looking for an exit and you go from doing, let's call it 10% capital gain to say 30% capital gain, that's a big chunk. And I've got to make some decisions around this. There's other options. And so it was interesting talking to the first firm I talked to about this. They've already had a stack of businesses wanting to leave Australia, exploring exactly what I was talking about. I then spoke to the head of the Angels community out of Brisbane, Australia, Angel Investment Community. And he said, I've had a really bad thing happen. And I said, what's that? He said, I've had one of my investments go completely ballistic. And this little bit of money I tipped in is now worth $60 million. And I said, that's great news. He said, yeah, the problem is the government is wanting to take 10% unrealized capital gains.
Oh, they're doing unrealized capital gains.
Unrealized capital gains, a new law they passed.
Yeah.
Unrealized capital gains, 10%. So I've got to come up with $6 million.
Yeah.
And I just don't have the cash. And I don't know what to do yet. I'm trying.
It's almost another show. I feel like we're diverting a little bit, but it is almost another show because,
it's disastrous.
It's many people who buy options or employees get options and then they exercise them before the company sells, and then things go wrong. And that actually happened in my life, right? But before things go wrong, and then they end up paying hundreds of thousands in taxes and they never even made a cent.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's a scary thing. Yeah, it's very scary.
The number one thing you've got to have in these circumstances also is a good personal accountant and a good corporate accountant. I actually have two separate accountants.
And a good psychologist.
Yeah, and a good psychologist in these times. Yeah. But you have a good personal accountant, good corporate accountant. So I've already talked to my corporate accountant. My personal accountant is that I can't talk to you yet. I'm gathering all the facts and how do we navigate our clients through this mess. And I said, yeah, that's fine. It's okay. We'll talk next week. And so it's an absolute disaster.
I got another external shock one that I think I'm thinking far. And this is the one the big one, right? I was tempted, should I maybe not even bring this up? And those who follow my story know what I'm going to say here. They know what happened, but I'm going to take you back again. It's the same company that the phone lines got cut. We spent 10 years building it, took it public, merged with a cable company. It went to over $1 billion in market cap. I'm 29 years old. I own 13% of this company at this point. We had signed up to when we merged the company, I had an 18-month lockup. And something happened in March of 2000. And that's the external shock that you were talking about, right? And we know what happened.
Yep.
The dot-com crash, right? And when we talk about a crash, people in the audience don't know this here right now, but when we talk about a crash, the NASDAQ went from 5,000 down to just
100.
No, it was 1,200, just over 1,200.
1,200, yeah, that's right.
So can you imagine if the stock market today dropped 80%? Can you imagine that? That is just such massive drop for such a technological, massive innovation like the internet hitting, and broadband was just hitting in 2002, 2000 as well. And so here it was, we were like on top of the world, company was doing very well. We had signed up to this, we spent 10 years building the company, and we signed up with this merger. We did the merger, stock went to $1 billion, and within 18 months within 18 months, within 6 months to a year after we signed the merger, the .com crash happens and the NASDAQ fell. We were trying to raise $50 million at the time. And unfortunately, we pulled the offering. We said, oh, we'll wait till it gets better. The NASDAQ went from 5,000 to 4,000. We're saying, oh, let's just wait until it gets better. If anybody's followed the stock market, it took 15 years for the NASDAQ to hit 5,000 again. But that led to filing for bankruptcy protection. Okay. And unfortunately, the shares that were trading at $19 on the stock market, I ended up selling those shares for 6 cents a share. 6 cents a share. It was a disaster. And so that's when I basically, you guys get emotional because the day I found out that we were going to go into bankruptcy protection, I was running a division of about 40 people, and I called them all into the room. And I said, everyone here, every one of you is being laid off right now, including myself. And when you make these decisions in business, it impacts you and your family. And obviously I lost 98% of my wealth. It was a horrible thing. But there were probably about 15 paper millionaires who lost it all as well, because we had options in the company. And there were hundreds of people who lost their job as well. And I will always remember that. I will always remember those people and how my decision to build a company over 10 years and then to mess it up over 10 weeks and exit, I will always remember how I impacted others. So I did go home those days and curl up on the bed and I didn't want to think about it anymore. Now, the one thing I did do is it took me a few weeks to get over this. I said, what do I really love to do? My brother and I launched another company, and it was in the hosting space at the time. And we love technology. We love the way technology affects and changes the world. So we launched this hosting company, and it became one of the most successful hosting companies in the world. We took it public in 2006, and in 2008, we sold it to a Fortune 500 company for 17 times EBITDA, 130% over our publicly traded stock price. And this time, we took all cash. So the lesson I learned from that, Michael, was that liquidity or control. We had an 18-month lockup. We're not going to allow our company to be in a lockup like that, or my shares. I'll only allow, if we do go down a path, I have to have liquidity. I have to have cash or liquid stock. I go through an exit. And the second thing is bad things do happen. And we saw that repeat again in 2022. 2021 was hot. And then in 2022, you saw stocks collapse. You saw things were crazy in 2021 with NFTs and GameStop stock going through the roof. And so one of the benefits of this collapse, one of the things that I believe has helped change the world has been the book, Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat. And the book never could have been written had I not gone through losing most of my wealth at that time in my life. It became the basis of Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat versus Start, Scale, Keep. Because bad things do happen. And it happens to a lot of people. And in our life is a short life. And when we do have a success, we want to take some money off the table. And there's many reasons to do that as we go throughout our life. And versus trying to hold on to that one big payday 25 years later, because things can go awry, things can go off the rails. And it really became the basis of the book. And I've done now 12 very successful businesses, multi-million-dollar companies. I sold the second company that sold to a Fortune 500 company. We sold it a month before the Lehman crisis.
Timing.
The .club, the other company that we sold recently to GoDaddy, we sold it in 2021. And that was like 6 months before the tech wreck. I was asked to speak at MIT eventually after all these sort of like timely exits. And I was asked to speak there, and they asked me, how are you so good at starting and scaling businesses and exiting? And how do you get your timing so right? And I said, well, that's because I probably screwed it up more than most people would have by losing $100 million or more, 120, 130 million when I was 29 years old. And it really is the basis. It really did become the basis for the book. And today that book obviously has been a best-selling book, 15 number one on Amazon and 40 global awards. And I really believe that we can learn from these experiences, these disasters. I didn't have to tell people. I literally was publicly embarrassed on the news on at the time in Canada, the CNN, sort of the CNBC of Canada, BNN News Network. And it was very embarrassing. It was nice to come back to the news network, though, in 2008. And they ran a segment about myself, about how I had went from rags to riches to rags to riches. So that was pretty nice. Now, life's a roller coaster. When you're an entrepreneur, life is a roller coaster. You're going to go up and you're going to go down. And you're going to deal with disaster. And how you deal with that disaster, what you learn from it, that is the key. And that's what makes you a stronger entrepreneur. And we keep coming back. We get knocked down, we get knocked down, we get knocked down, and we keep coming back. Right,
I
Michael?
think, Colin, one of the things you often say is that entrepreneurship is a skill. It's like a trade. And the trade we have as entrepreneurs is we know how to make money. And when you've been through some of these experiences that you've related and I've related and all that sort of stuff, is that you know how to, and you learn how to navigate them, because it is a trade. There's a skill set that you go through. Is it in disastrous times? Is it fun? No, it's not fun, but you work the problem. And the thing as entrepreneurs, for those of you in the audience or on the podcast, need to understand is that there's not many people in the world who actually know how to make money, to take nothing and turn it into something. And they're called entrepreneurs. And if you have that gift, then it could be that this business fails, but the next one succeeds. And you get back up and you just keep on learning and you get better and better. And
exactly.
Yeah, so,
and I got a nice clip. I got a nice clip. You want to hear it?
Yeah, far away.
You might recognize the voice, okay?
He's going to keep you there permanently if you let it. You'll be a nobody. He's going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, then go out and get what you're worth. But you got to be willing to take the hits and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Or that ain't you. You're better than that.
You got to hit and you just get back up. You take those hits.
It's
about the character of an entrepreneur isn't about getting hit. Okay, we're going to be hit, right? We're all going to be hit. Maybe we're not all Elon Musk, okay? But when we get hit, it's about how we get back up.
That's exactly right. That's a great speech. Yeah. Because we will be hit. You will be hit. And you'll feel the lowest of the low at sometimes. But are you going to get back up? Are you going to get back up? And that's what entrepreneurs do. And you'll learn a lot. Let me tell you, when you get hit and you're down on the mat, whatever, and you get back up, just say to yourself, I've just been on $1 million training course. I better make sure I learn from it. Or whatever the amount of money it is, or whatever the situation is. I've just been on a really expensive training course. Learn. So the next time you hit, you don't even go down. You stand. And you take it, and you deal it back.
Yeah, that's a great way to end it, Michael. Thank you. I love this session. Yeah.
This has been a great show. For those of you who are wondering about Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat, that's the book that Colin's actually written. And it's become the Bible for entrepreneurs, quite seriously. I'm going to speak your book for a second here, Colin, because for those of you in the audience who don't know it, just go and buy it. Seriously, it's going to cost you $30 or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. Go to Amazon. Just go and buy it. Don't read books. Get the Audible then and listen to it. Seriously, it's the best training course you could ever go on. It's full of so many of these sort of stories and stuff like that. It's really from the heart. And it's the amount of wisdom in that book, it's years, it's decades of experience and interviews and you name it. There's so much stuff in there. Just go and get it. Just stop messing around. When we've closed the room out, first thing you should do is go to Amazon and just go and get it, or Audible or whatever it is. Just go and get it. And trust me, Colin's not retiring off the book royalties or anything like that. He really isn't. So it's not for the money. He just has a love for the entrepreneurial community. In this clubhouse, we've been doing this now for 4 years, Colin, and we haven't made a penny. I'm not aware of making a penny, that's for sure. And I know you're not aware of making a penny either. We do it because we love entrepreneurs. And we want to share our experiences and our knowledge with you to help you out in your business. And this is what the show, The Complete Entrepreneur, is all about. It's about learning to live the life of an entrepreneur. And I look forward to seeing you at 5 p.m. next week on The Complete Entrepreneur. As a part of Startup.club, I'll finish with one last thing. Go to startup.club, sign up for the newsletter. You'll get one email a month. And if you're thinking, oh, I don't want to be spammed, I'll just grow up. You're going to get one email a month. And it's so packed full of awesome stuff for entrepreneurs. And it costs you nothing.
Yeah.
It costs you nothing.
And I
by
noticed
the way,
also, Michael,
if you really don't like it, unsubscribe for
yeah, there you go. And I noticed a lot of people in the audience here who are not members of Startup Club on Clubhouse.
Yeah.
You can click the logo at the top here and join Startup Club. But you really don't know what's going on in Startup Club unless you sign up to that mailing list, because that's what tells you who are the speakers we have on. We have a lot of guest speakers coming on Startup Club. And if you want to know who's coming on, go to startup.club and sign up the email list. Again, we don't do any advertising. We don't do anything like that. We just try to help people out here. This has been a project, passion project for Michael and I and so many other people, probably a dozen people who work on Startup Club now, and we're all basically volunteers, and we do have some paid staff that help it out. But thank you very much, and we'll see you all next week.
Okay, look forward to it. See you later, everyone. But all the best in your business. Bye.